Oh, hi there, friends. Mandy here. Restorative grief is all about creating easy access to healing no matter where or who you are. That's why I want you to remember that if you want grief support beyond a podcast, my 31-day guidebook is available to order on Amazon. Embracing our losses without losing ourselves is a reflective journey into the holistic needs of grievers and learning to support yourself, mind, heart, body, and spirit. Don't just wing it. You can lean into grief work with a guide. The link for the book and more are available in the show notes, and as always, you can reach out with questions. But for now, let's get on to this week's episode. Welcome back to Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart. You are listening to episode 182, titled, How Do We Know If We Belong to Ourselves? Ever had one of those moments where you look around your life and think, am I actually living the life I want? Or have I been trying to live someone else's version of it? Maybe you've spent so much time people-pleasing or striving for approval that you don't even remember what it feels like to belong to yourself. And let's be real, sometimes it's easier to play along, to fit in, to nod and smile, and to do what's expected. But deep down, that's exhausting. This week, let's learn how to reclaim our sense of self, our energy, and our ownership over our own life. We all want to belong somewhere, but how do we know if we can truly belong to ourselves? How can we tell if we're living in alignment with who we really are or want to be, rather than chasing some false sense of belonging that's all about fitting in? Spoiler alert, fitting in is not the same as belonging. First, let's clear up the difference. Fitting in is when we bend, shift, and twist ourselves to match the expectations of others. It's that inner sensation of, I need to be this way to be accepted here. You've felt it in the workplace, at family gatherings, and maybe even in your closest relationships. Fitting in is about performance. It's about wearing the mask that makes you blend in, but underneath, there's always a growing sense of disconnect. Belonging, on the other hand, is different. When you belong to yourself, you don't need to perform. You don't need to shapeshift. You just are. It's a feeling of alignment, like your values, your needs, and your desires are all in sync, and you are making choices that honor your true self. And that's the key difference. Fitting in relies on external validation, but belonging to yourself comes from internal alignment. So how do you get there? And how can you tell when you're truly living in that place? Well, the answer in part lies in our relationship and understanding of grief. And it's not just the grief of losing people or things, but the grief around losing parts of ourselves along the way. When we try so hard to fit in, we often end up grieving our authentic selves, sometimes without even realizing that's what we're doing. That's why such a large part of the restorative grief approach is acknowledging our sense of self that's been lost and allowing time to find a new pathway toward the self we are becoming. When we don't belong to ourselves, we feel scattered, pulled in a million directions, and often unsure of why we're doing what we're doing. We make decisions based on what we think will please others or avoid conflict, rather than what feels right deep down. But when we're in the process of restorative grief, we start to notice those patterns of behavior. We begin to unpack the ways we've been conditioned to believe that fitting in is the same as belonging. Grief teaches us that belonging to ourselves is not something we achieve overnight. It's a practice of continually showing up for ourselves, especially when it's uncomfortable. It's learning to listen to our inner voice again, especially when it's been drowned out by the external noise for so long. So how can you tell when you belong to yourself? It's not always obvious, but there are some signs. First, you experience self-acceptance. You've stopped fighting against who you are, and you no longer spend energy trying to fix the parts of you that don't conform to the desires of others. You accept yourself fully, flaws, quirks, and all. You start to trust your inner voice instead of constantly second-guessing your decisions or looking for validation. In that place, you trust yourself to know what's best for you. And that doesn't mean you never ask for advice or let others help you along, but it means your inner compass is your main guide, not the opinion of others. You also begin to set boundaries that stick, not just because you're supposed to, but because you genuinely know what is healthy for you. You say no when something doesn't serve you, and you're not riddled with guilt or shame afterward for doing so. You also begin to live authentically because you are done performing. You've stopped trying to mold yourself into someone else's version of who you should be, and instead you pursue relationships, work, and hobbies that resonate with who you actually are. Lastly, you have much greater emotional independence. You're not relying on external approval for your sense of self-worth. And so your relationships are important, but your identity isn't wrapped up in whether others validate you and your choices. These are just a few of the signs, but you can tell the underlying theme. Belonging to yourself means you're living in alignment with your true self and what you want, not performing for the approval of others. This place feels like a deep exhale, like you can finally breathe again and come home. One of the clearest indicators of whether we belong to ourselves is how our body feels. When we are in a constant state of performance or trying to fit in, our bodies hold on to tension, anxiety, and stress even before we arrive in a place that feels uncomfortable. There's a tightness, a feeling of disconnection. But when we can belong to ourselves, our bodies can relax. It's a feeling of ease. When we enter into a place that is known for disruption, we are overcome with peace because of where we are and who we are, no matter what the expectations are of the space. Belonging to ourselves is about embodiment, about coming back to the wisdom of our bodies and trusting that they know what's right for us. So often we've been taught to override those signals in order to fit in or please others, but restorative grief helps us reconnect with that physical sense of belonging. We begin to notice where we're holding tension, and through that awareness, we can start to release it. The challenge, of course, is that the world around us is constantly telling us to fit in, to conform to societal norms, to meet expectations, to prioritize other people's comfort over our own authenticity. For many of us, especially those living at intersections of race, gender, class, and identity, which, to be clear, is all of us, the pressure to fit in can feel overwhelming because we are often told, either directly or indirectly, that we are too much or, just as often, not enough. But restorative grief is inviting us to push back against those narratives. It asks us to grieve the ways we've been told to hide the parts of ourselves and to reclaim the parts of us we've been taught to suppress. Belonging to yourself in a world that demands conformity is an act of resistance, a way of saying, I am worthy as I am, and I don't need to fit in with you to belong. Belonging to yourself is ultimately an act of liberation. It's freeing yourself from the need for external validation and reclaiming your right to be sovereign and live in alignment with your true self. It's about honoring the grief that comes with releasing who you thought you had to be and celebrating the person you are meeting now of who you actually are. When we belong to ourselves, we are no longer chasing approval. We are living in the fullness of our identities, messy, imperfect, and whole. And that kind of belonging, that's the belonging that teaches us how to integrate our grief with compassion instead of running away from it in fear. Thank you for listening to episode 182 of Restorative Grief. It is a gift to realize true belonging comes from within. It's about living in alignment with your authentic self rather than trying to fit into others' expectations. Belonging to yourself means accepting who you are, setting boundaries, and trusting your inner voice, all of which leads to deeper self-compassion and emotional independence. When we stop shape-shifting to fit in, we create space for genuine connection with ourselves and others. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, thank you for finding us and tuning in. Please subscribe so you can ensure you get every single episode right on time when they drop each Sunday. For more content from me, consider becoming a patron as well for bonus episodes, weekly workbooks, and more. Links for all the things are in the show notes, and of course, reach out to me on social media if you want to connect. And as always, before we go, please remember, The only solution for grief is to do the work of grieving. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week.